That's really all it took for this pretty dramatic military exchange between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed neighbors.
Yeah, back in May 2025, and triggered by, well, a truly devastating terrorist attack.
It's just a startlingly short time, isn't it?
Uh,
Especially given the potential global implications. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. The 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, codenamed Operation Sindoor.
What's really striking, I think, is just how quickly things escalated. You go from this horrific act of terrorism to, boom, direct military confrontation.
Oh, they
And for you, our listener, trying to make sense of these complex global events, well, you need to get to the core of it efficiently. That's what we're aiming for.
Exactly. We want to explore the sequence, the factors involved, give you that crucial understanding without getting totally bogged down.
So, the catalyst. Let's start there. The April 22nd, 2025 terrorist attack in Pahalgam. That's in Indian-administered Kashmir.
A terrible event. 26 people killed, mostly Hindu tourists. The group blamed was the Resistance Front, which has known links to Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Which operates out of Pakistan, yeah. And that immediately led to India pointing the finger, accusing Pakistan of actively supporting these groups.
Charge Pakistan strongly denied, as they usually do.
Right. So over the next few minutes, we're going to really dissect this chain. The attack, India's quick response, Pakistan's reaction, the information piece, which is huge.
Definitely. The info war.
The diplomatic scramble to sort of pull things back from the brink, and what this whole episode tells us about, well, where things stand now.
And you have to remember, this Pahalgam attack, it didn't just happen out of the blue, did it?
No, not at all. I mean, relations between India and Pakistan are, well,
Yeah.
historically strained, especially over Kashmir.
Yep.
But this specific attack, targeting civilians like that, tourists, the death toll, it just acted as a huge accelerant. It pushed an already tense situation right towards, a military response.
Absolutely. It wasn't just another incident. The targeting of Hindu tourists, particularly, that really struck a nerve in India. Huge public anger, enormous pressure on the government to do something decisive.
And the timing, April 22nd. The place, Pahalgam. The victims. Then the claim from the Resistance Front linked to Lashkar-e-Taiba. It just instantly brought that whole very sensitive issue of cross-border terrorism right back to the forefront.
India saying, again, Pakistan's involved. That was the spark, really.
It does raise that fundamental question, doesn't it? How do nations see terrorism? What's the trigger point for a military response?
Yeah.
Especially with all that history of suspicion.
Yeah. India's accusation, Pakistan's denial, that's the essential backdrop for Operation Sindoor.
Okay, so Operation Sindoor, India's response, launched May 7th, 2025.
And what's remarkable is the speed and the tech involved.
I think
A 23-minute airstrike
23 minutes.
using things like SAM-P missiles, BrahMos cruise missiles, and these Indo-Israeli Sky Striker drones.
Right, the Celepi and BrahMos, those are serious pieces of kit. Precision-guided cruise missiles suggest they were aiming for specific targets, deep strikes, trying to maybe minimize collateral damage, theoretically.
And the Sky Striker drones. Probably recon, maybe even strike capability. It points to a coordinated, multi-layered kind of attack.
The targets, India said, were 9 alleged terrorist infrastructure sites, some in Pakistan proper, some in Pakistan-administered Kashmir.
And India's claim was pretty bold. Over 100 militants killed, including some key figures they linked to past attacks.
Yeah, and what's significant there, perhaps, is the implication of a tactical shift from India. Speed, advanced standoff weapons, maybe moving towards rapid targeted hits rather than bigger, longer ground operations.
As always happens.
Exactly, the narratives diverge immediately.
Pakistan painted a completely different picture. They said, no, you didn't hit terrorist sites, you hit civilian areas, including mosques.
And tragically, they reported their own casualties, at least 31 people, including a young girl and teenagers.
Understandably, Pakistan's prime minister came out strongly, called it a cowardly act of war.
Which, predictably, led to a response. Pakistan retaliated, drone and missile strikes of their own.
And just to clarify for everyone, when we say retaliation, it means, an action taken by one state because they feel another state has done something hostile. Pakistan saw India's strike that way.
And that's where it gets incredibly dangerous, doesn't it? Two nuclear powers feeling attacked, feeling they have to hit back. That escalatory cycle, even if meant to be limited, it carries massive risks.
Yeah. Now, India's defenses did play a big role here. Their S-400 systems, that advanced Russian air defense system, they apparently blocked most of Pakistan's incoming strikes.
Keyword, Most.
Right, not all. Because reports still came out of casualties from Pakistan's retaliation. 16 civilians in Indian-administered Kashmir, and also 11 Pakistani military personnel.
So even with top-tier defenses like the S-400, there's no guarantee of, total protection. The human cost is still very real.
And it shows the strategic game too, right? You get advanced defenses, the other side tries to find ways to beat them. It fuels a kind of arms race dynamic.
Definitely. And then you had this other layer, the information war. It just exploded almost instantly.
Yeah, tell us about that. What do we mean by misinformation here?
Well, it's basically false or inaccurate information being spread. Sometimes it's accidental, just confusion. But in contexts like this, often it seems quite deliberate.
So both sides were putting out completely different numbers for casualties, different descriptions of what was actually hit.
Exactly. Competing narratives pushed out incredibly fast, which makes it almost impossible, especially in the moment, to figure out what actually happened on the ground.
And that speed of information, true or false, in the digital age.
Yeah.
It massively shapes how people see the conflict, doesn't it? Both at home and internationally.
Absolutely. It can sway public opinion, impact diplomacy. It can either help calm things down or, well, pour fuel on the fire.
Fortunately, diplomacy did eventually kick in. We saw key players, the U.S., the U.K., Saudi Arabia, urging restraint.
That word restraint. Basically, everyone calm down, don't make it worse.
The UN chimed in, too, calling for maximum restraint. And eventually they got to a ceasefire.
Right, a formal agreement to stop shooting. That was agreed on May 10th, 2025, set to start at 5:00 p.m. Indian time.
And all these efforts, negotiating between countries to solve problems peacefully, that's the diplomatically part. That's all aimed at de-escalation, just bringing the temperature down.
Which is crucial when you're talking about nuclear armed states. The global pressure to de-escalate must have been intense.
But even then, it wasn't smooth sailing, was it? There were reports initially of ceasefire violations from both sides.
Yeah, it really highlights the deep mistrust there, how fragile those agreements can be initially.
But, okay, they managed to avoid things spiraling further. Talks between military officials happened, and that led to actual de-escalation troops pulling back a bit, tensions easing by around May 12th.
Which is good, obviously. But it's crucial to remember, like you said, that just cools off the immediate crisis. It doesn't fix the underlying problems.
Exactly. The root causes are still there. And afterwards, both sides tried to spin the narrative, didn't they? India's Prime Minister Modi called Operation Sindoor a new normal for fighting terrorism. Like, expect more of this.
A more assertive posture, yeah. While Pakistan's prime minister kept pushing for talks, especially on the big one, Kashmir.
So you see those core issues just resurfacing immediately. India focused on terrorism, Pakistan focused on Kashmir, still the major sticking points.
And potential flashpoints for the future, absolutely.
So if we step back, what's the real significance here? What are the key things for you to take away?
Well, first, as we touched on, this was apparently the first time we saw direct drone warfare between two countries with nuclear weapons. That's a big deal.
Yeah, how so? What does that change?
Well, drones allow warfare from a distance, precision strikes maybe, but they also bring up ethical issues, change the whole dynamic. It could make conflicts seem perhaps lower risk for the attacker initially.
Which might actually increase the chance of miscalculation or things getting out of hand.
That's the concern, yeah. Easier to start something if you think the cost is lower. Plus, maybe easier to deny involvement sometimes.
Okay, that's one major point. What else?
The name itself. Operation Sindoor. We mentioned Sindoor, the red powder worn by married Hindu women, naming the operation after that.
It directly links the military action to the women widowed by the Pahalgam attack.
Exactly. It adds this powerful emotional weight. It's communicating something very specific both to people in India and to Pakistan, tapping into national sentiment, national identity.
And the final point.
Just the sheer speed of it all. From the terrorist attack to a direct military clash between nuclear powers, it happened incredibly fast. Days, really.
Modern technology just compresses that timeline, doesn't it? Less time for diplomacy before the shooting starts.
It really does, which makes having reliable ways for adversaries to talk to each other and mechanisms to de-escalate quickly even more critical than ever.
So, wrapping this deep dive up, the key takeaways for you are pretty stark, I think. That India-Pakistan relationship, still incredibly fragile.
Yeah. The ceasefire held, the immediate crisis passed, but those big underlying issues, Kashmir, terrorism, they're still right there, unresolved.
And critically, this conflict brought drone warfare between nuclear states into the picture. That's concerning first. And it signals, well, a potentially more volatile future for security in that region.
And connecting this back to you, thinking about global events, it really forces you to consider what these kinds of rapid, intense conflicts mean in a nuclear world.
You have to think about technology's role and how much information or misinformation shapes how we even understand what's happening.
Right.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. With warfare moving this fast and information being so complex and often contested, how can anyone, individuals, the international community, really get a clear picture of the causes and consequences?
And maybe more importantly, what's the evolving role for diplomacy in trying to navigate all this complexity and stop future escalations, especially when the stakes are, well, unimaginably high?